Welcome to the Funky Jazz Podcast. Dumelang, I'm Shani. Hello, everybody. And today we are at Joburg North. We're not in the Val, but we're in Joburg North, and we are with the amazing doctors Lucas Moloi. This is just going to be on another level. So don't go anywhere because this is just going to be mind-blowing. Dr. Lucas Moloi, let's go back post-apartheid, 1994. This country, it was declared free. But nowadays, when you're talking to a lot of people, people are saying that we are free, but we are not free economic-wise. Economy is still in the hands of white people. What are your thoughts regarding that?
So I think what is important, we've got to start here. What was it that the liberation movements were formed for and to achieve, right? And that's where we must start, because that's where the politicians themselves missed it. Now, ANC starting when it started, 1907, 1906, 1907, that's when the thing started going, right? Not the date that you hear the ANC started.
Yeah.
1906, 1907. The kings from two nations, Batlokwa and Magolokwe, didn't have their land. And they decided at that stage, we need to go to London and to go speak with that king that we need our land. At that stage, Josiah Changasa Gumede was the secretary of the Magolokwe tribe, right? The same Josiah Gumede that became later on the president of the ANC and the secretary of the ANC. So Josiah Gumede was the secretary of the kings. They went with him to the UK, 1906 around June. When they came back in 1907. They came back unsuccessful on the mission of finding their land. And when they came back, the king said to him, we need to form a movement that is the same as the movement we saw in the UK, which was called the Brotherhood. They said we need to form the same movement so that we can be able to talk in the language that they understand. Because you saw when they speak with the Brotherhood, they listened. So let's form that movement. That was the route that paved for the first liberation movement, the ANC, to be started. Now, when they sat down and decided to start this movement, and that there were two things only two things that they wanted. They said to them, we want you to go and fight for our land. Secondly, we want you to go fight for our dignity. Two things, land and dignity. There was never freedom there. We've always been free. You are born a free man.
Yeah.
Nobody can give you freedom. So we were born free on our land, but we wanted dignity in our land.
Whoa. Why has that not been told about?
Freedom became one. Freedom to them became the right to vote. There was never once where the mission was the right to vote. Vote for what? How can you fight for a right to vote in a system that is created to exclude you? The system was architected to exclude us.
Yeah.
So whether you are given a right to vote in that system doesn't matter, because the system is created to exclude you. So in your voting, when you are voting who of your masters should be greater than the other, not you. You are excluded from the system. In its architecture, it was designed to exclude you. You can never be part of it. So they fought for a right to vote. So we've got the right to vote. That's the freedom they're talking about.
Yeah.
We've got the right to vote. The right to vote in a system that made sure that you are economically dependent on those that colonized you. A system that made sure that you still work for those. The system that made sure that you don't take your land back from those that colonized you. That's the freedom they're talking about. There was never freedom. Nobody wanted freedom. We wanted dignity and land.
Okay. Why then did he come back and then the ANC was then pushing the whole freedom thing, and that's number one. Number two, did he get what he was looking for when he wanted land and dignity?
He was only a messenger of the kings. So when the movement started, remember that even the money to start this movement came from kings.
Okay.
So when they started the movement,
Nation
yes,
local, okay.
when they started this movement, to them they said, what is called amakholwa. That's what Abu Josiah Skumeto were called, amakholwa.
Hence, controversies.
The believers. You know, Mkonesi came later. The believers, amakholwa. Because why? What did they call her to? What did they believe to? The education system of the West. So those that were educated were called amakholwa because they have now believed in the system that was brought by the West. So amakholwa were the ones that were going to start the ANC because they understood the principles that the brotherhood and those were using. The kings didn't understand that. They understand African ways.
So that is why you will find your Nelson Mandela, they were lawyers, your Thabo Mbeki as well, they were all educated. So
and that is why when it came from that amakholwa. And when you look at it, take you back, you'd realize that in the beginning, so much of them were from royal families. So this is what happened. The name chief that you hear today, ANC, everybody calling each other chief. Why? Where did it come from? Now, remember, Chief Albert Lithuli in the ANC. Mandela, a chief himself. So when you look, you find that a lot of them that became part and the driving force of the ANC were coming from royal families. And in order to hide them, in order to hide and protect them, the movement started calling everybody chief. They started calling everybody chief because they couldn't expose which ones were the chiefs. Because then it put their life in danger. Then they all became chief. Now I hear people loosely calling each other chief this, chief that, chief. They don't even know why were people called chiefs. So the reasoning of this was that you understand the system, you speak their language, we call. Start this movement so that you can discuss with them and negotiate for our land.
On the language they
Going for war was not an option. We had lost too many people already. They had guns, we didn't. They came in shooting, guns blazing. The kings didn't have the stomach to do it anymore. Their people were dying. And they said, go and speak with them in the way that they understand. Negotiate terms. But what you are negotiating with them, we want our land back, please. And we want the dignity. We want to be treated with dignity in our land as human beings, so, not to vote.
So they did not necessarily want to kick the white men out. They were like, it's fine,
no.
whatever.
You hear already.
Dignity and land.
You hear already. You've got your gun. Can we have our land back?
And then you can still.
And the dignity. We'll live peacefully with you. We had lived peacefully with them from the day that they came. The only fights that started was when they wanted what was not theirs. Remember the first battle of the white people, or the Europeans, not white people, of the Europeans and us, was the war between them and the Khois in the Cape Town. And what was the fight for? The battle was because they wanted to take what was not theirs. And the Khois said, you cannot come onto this land. We give you courtesy, we give you food, yet you still want to steal from us. And that's when the battle started. So the only fight that we had with them was because they were taking what is not theirs. Not because we...
Is it the reason why when Nelson Mandela became the first black president, people were thinking that we're going to go into war, we're going to kick out the white people in this country. But he came and said, no, let us form a rainbow nation. What are your thoughts regarding that, us being a rainbow nation? Are we really a rainbow nation? Or was it the thing that, Nelson Mandela was, I think, captured to say that, speak to them, just say that we want a rainbow nation?
Sure. Look at what it is. Politically, there's a lot of people that are bashing Mandela for the decisions.
Yeah.
Here is the thing. At that stage, like 100 years before, losing more Africans was still not yet an option. And when we looked at how other freedoms, as they call liberation, was won in other countries and that, it meant those countries needed to completely bend down and be rebuilt. The question at that stage for them was, do we want to bend it and rebuild it? Or do we want to start where it is and go up? Was it a good decision? Was it the right decision? It's not me. It's not for me to call, right? The truth of the matter is, their negotiations, we did not come out on top of those negotiations.
Sure.
And the results of it are showing today. Whether it was the right decisions for them at the stage and that, I have no right to say. I was not on the table, I didn't know. What I can tell you though, is that you don't have true liberation until you've got ownership to the land that you own. South Africa, Africa as a continent, it's really the only place which is a no man's land. What do I mean by no man's land? That's why you have been programmed now to talk about white people and black people. That means no man's land. Because when you talk about white people and black people, it means they belong where they are. Let me tell you, you go to China, you'll find Chinese people. It doesn't matter where a Chinese person finds themselves, they will still be called a Chinese people. An Indian person, it doesn't matter whether they're in the UK or where, they're still called Indians. It is only when you come to Africa, where people come to Africa and they are called black, white. And that is because in India, the Indian soil belongs to Indians. The Chinese soil belongs to Chinese. But the African soil belongs to black and white. Because you don't have an African. So it's a no man's land. The reason that it became the issue of color was to make sure that everyone belongs to that land. It belongs to no one. That's why they are not using Africans. It means it's Africa of Africans. They are not white, they are Europeans. Where do they belong? In Europe. Even if they are here, but their home is in Europe. And that's what we need to first get into our mind. When you talk about us and them, it should be that, Europeans and Africans. And it doesn't mean that when we say that we are chasing you away, we want you to go. No, we want you to know where you stand. We want you to know your position. You are an European in Africa. You are a European. Never mix that and think you are African. You cannot be. That's why you hear a lot of them, no, we're African, we were born here, I'm African, why must I go? No, you cannot be. You are European. You remain European. You are just a European born in Africa. That's it.
And cut out the whole color thing, because then it might just mess up the whole
Cut out the color thing. When you talk about the origin, when you talk about the origin, you also take away the issue of segregation and all these things.
Yes.
Because you're talking origin. You are not saying you are black and white. So you don't bring racism and these things inside. You are talking you are European and you are African. And that is the truth. It cannot change. You are European, you are African. But you are a European that was born in Africa. Why, after so many years, people in America are still called African Americans? After so many years, they're still called African Americans. Because the fact is to remind them all the time that you are not home.
Home is Africa.
You are an African American. So you are a European African. That's what you are. You are a European African.
So you're European first.
You are European first.
Before you can even
You are an Indian African.
You know, talking about Africa being a no man's land, you know, and you know the diversity of a black person and a European person. You know, what comes into my mind is the resources that we have in this country, in Africa, you know, and then also colonization, you know, and my question to you is that, do you think that our beautiful continent, Africa as a whole, they wanted it to be a no man's land because of they wanted to loot our resources in Africa?
We were not colonized by Europeans first. We were first colonized by Arabs.
Okay.
Arabs came first. They caught slaves first. They sold slaves first.
Okay.
Europeans only followed the money. They heard from the Arabs about where the money was, where the resources were, and they followed them to those resources, to that money.
But wait,
So,
because I mean, why would you go to someone
We-
else's house?
if you look at take for an example the Tswana Sotho people. The Tswana Sotho people are deemed to have been the first people to melt and make things with gold, with metal.
Okay, that's it.
So when they come to Africa, they find people not just with gold that is on the ground, they find people with gold that they are wearing.
Okay. Wow, I did not know that.
And that's the genesis
Right?
of economy.
Right?
Yeah, no, please
They
let him
find,
finish. The
they
genesis
find
of
people
economy.
with gold that they are wearing,
Okay.
gold that they are making statues with, gold that they are using.
We're just sitting there.
And now it's not only a resource that is sitting in the ground. It's actually currency. They came to get what? Beads. They were coming here for exchange of things. They were
Okay.
getting beads, they got these things and they realized what these people were doing. And that's why they wanted that land, because all of a sudden it means this land has got more than what we have.
Oh,
There's something that we can see people are doing with it. We want it.
Okay.
So if you look at the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire had a Roman Empire in Africa, Egypt. With every Caesars of the Roman Empire, that you would find that they had Egypt as a province of Rome. Egypt was a province of Rome.
Okay.
Look at what Italy is. But Egypt was a province.
Province.
Because of what? Because of the gold, the resources, because of the pyramids, because of the things that they saw there. And they were not just on the ground, it was civilization. So don't be lied to about civilization starting anywhere else but here. They saw civilization here. That's why they wanted this land. Because they thought civilization belonged to the land. We built pyramids when they knew nothing about such. We taught them mathematics. How can you build a pyramid if you're not a genius in mathematics? So the things that you see, after so many years of them learning so many things and that, they still cannot figure out how did we manage to lift up that size of rocks, to put them on top of each other to go up and build a pyramid. They can't figure it out. It's still a mystery.
Mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. And they cannot get their mind around it. They will never get their mind around it.
And then they still have the audacity to miss.
Now if you look, they have turned us into consumers.
Exactly. When
They've
you go
turned us
into
into that.
history, it shows that we are innovators. We are manufacturers.
When you
we are
look at-
scientists.
When you look at Egypt, you would find that the first, I think it was the first 8 pharaohs in Egypt were of dark skin.
Yeah, I've heard that.
They were not Arabs, they were not, they were of dark skin. Meaning yours and my people.
My top.
When you think about it and that, what they say we come from, they say we come from the Great Lakes area, which means South Sudan, Somalia, Egypt, and that's where we came from before. So we are the very same people of that civilization.
Oh gosh, I have such many follow-up questions.
And now what they have done was to make sure that you become a consumer.
But how did they get that right if we are such pyramid geniuses and if
Came up with
we
mathematics
could
and all of
turn
that.
gold into whatever we wanted to use? How did they get it right?
Times. Or let me say, when you're doing something, it should never be about you. every single time. There are things that you do that are about you, but not everything is about you all the time. So I started the only second online radio station in this country. I opened the second online radio station in this country. And I'm saying second because it could have been even the first, but at that stage, I didn't even care who went on air before me and the guys in Cape Town, you know? But it was only the two of us in the space at that time. It was only the two of us in this country. And I look back now, and there's podcasts and there's online radio stations, endless, right? I don't care to be recognized as the pioneer of that industry. Because that's not what it was about. It was about creating it and saying it's possible. And that was achieved. Because I look back, I see a string of online radio stations. So the purpose that I went into that for has been fulfilled. So when we do these things, that's about where it is. I can have the bravery to say something, but it is not in my hands for it to trend. It's in the hands of those that receive it and say, this is something that the next person needs to hear. My truth will remain my truth. The unfortunate part of it is that we have gotten into this chain of allowing the truth, recognizing the truth when the person is no longer there. So one day Lucas dies, and there's a flood of videos on social media on, once he said this, this man's mind, he said this, or this man said that, this man said... When he was alive, you said nothing about that. You actually didn't need to say anything about what he was doing, but you needed to act, because what he was doing it for was not to be celebrated, was not for clout. It was for people to change. So don't wait for that person to die and then you go and change your life, or you then go and talk about the teachings because the person is no longer there. You understand? So that's what we need to. We need to find ourselves and say, does it work? Does it say something to me? A lot of the message of Black Lives Matters has been the message of South Africa for decades and decades and decades. We've been saying Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
Nobody said anything about it.
Until something happens.
Something happens in America.
Yeah, until the radio said it.
And then
it's all trending now.
It's all trending. This
now it's alive.
You get what I'm saying? So I like the fact that we are starting to celebrate African stories and what is happening and what happened in Africa through Woman King, through Wakanda and those and that. But you go into the stories themselves are not even accurate, because they are told by people who don't know the stories, who hear about the stories. And now it seems like when people come out, it seems like no, we have joined the Wakanda movement. We've been Wakanda all along. They have just joined us.
The Black Panther movement goes way back.
You understand? So my thing is exactly that, to say a lot of things that we do so much, because now it has got an international label on it, then we want to run with it that this thing is super. Meanwhile, it's been happening around you all along. So what does it start with? And this is what I always say: understand what apartheid meant.
Okay.
And what was it meant to achieve? It was meant to achieve, it was meant to get you to appreciate yourself less don't see the things that you do, appreciate others more, see yourself as less. And that's what we see happening. That the very same thing can happen here, but if it comes to us, taking the very same thing that we've been doing, and it comes with someone else's who's not South African, and then, oh, this thing is so great. It's been happening there. When one of your own speaks intelligence, speaks sense, speaks wisdom,
You don't recognize it
until they have an American accent, you will not understand the wisdom that they are speaking. So you don't take your own seriously. So you only speak wisdom if your accent is an American accent. Those are the things that we need to change. So when we talk about media, the platform is there. You decide what goes trending. And you decide to make, when it's African, it has got to be bubblegum nonsense. So when it's South African something that is trending, it is always dancing challenges, it is always make yourself a fool challenges. Those will trend. But when it is an American thing that is trending, it's a speech that was made by Denzel, a speech that was made by so-and-so, a speech that was made, then it trends because it's an American thing.
Thinking about a man coming home and a son seeing their father having to beat the mother, you know. It goes back to where we are as a country today, and also the fact that South Africa has been redeemed as the highest country when it comes to gender-based violence, you know, to a point where gender-based violence now, it has been declared as a second pandemic, you know. Does that also originate from that?
Yes. So here's my thing. You can see it and declare that a pandemic.
Yeah.
In a country, you can see it and talk about such things. But you cannot punish someone using the name kafir.
No.
You cannot punish it. This is the very same cause of where we are.
Yeah.
Your constitution doesn't allow you to deal with someone that says kafir to the other one. You can't declare it a criminal offense and put someone in jail immediately for it. So it is in how we decide to deal with the legacies of apartheid that is going to change what becomes of the country. Because truth of the matter is, Africans in this country still don't feel as anything.
Yeah.
Africans in this country are still poor. Africans in this country are still workers. Africans in this country are still the violent race. Because the only way that they got to know how to survive was to be violent. Was to be able to stab each other with knives and everything. Because of the type of townships that you put them into, where you don't give people freedom. Why the architecture of it? Why do you think in every township how houses are built is that the kitchen doors must look at each other? There is no gap. We are on each other's doorstep, and the doors must look at each other. It was so that we can spy on each other. You must know what is happening by your neighbor. You must see who comes in and out of your neighbor's house. So that tomorrow when they need information, they ask you and you can give them information about what happens in your neighbor's house. But also so that you know the difficulties that your neighbor is going through, so that you know if your neighbor is not being faithful to their partners. And always we had to know things about each other so that they can use that against us. Why were their houses built so? I mean, where we stay now, the doors don't look at each other. I don't even know my neighbor because their door is not looking at my door. It's on the other side and that other side and that and this. So the whole system was built to create the type of people that we are. And what do we do when we come in power? We build the very same houses.
But is there hope for an African child?
Yes, there is hope.
Can the system be unlearned And talking about time frame, how long is it going to take us to unlearn that system?
How long did it take for the mind to be destroyed?
Not long.
If you're talking about us being taught that we are weak, we're not good for anything, and that it took over 200 years to get that right. 200 years. How do you remove a mindset of 200 years in 27 years? You can't. Especially when you don't have programs to remove it. For now, for the past years, we've been trying to survive. We haven't even gotten to the gist of it, where we are saying, let us teach our kids to think differently. We haven't even gotten to that. We were still trying to survive. And we were so much hoping to be part of the system, to the point that we forgot even to teach our kids the language of their parents.
That's sad.
So we became so busy trying to get into the system that we even thought that for our kids to get into that system, they must speak the language of the system, because then it will help. So before we are liberated, we need to teach ourselves the opposite of what we were taught. So 1913, we have what is called the Natives Land Act.
Okay.
So the Native Land Act, 1913, said eventually that black people cannot own land.
Okay.
So Africans cannot own land. That was the act. After 1907, when we went to ask them to give us the rights of our land back, they came 1913 and they said, Native Land Act, you can't have land, you can't own land. Not only did they do that, they then also started the process of segregating which parts of land are they going to allow you in. So by them facilitating that the group of people come together as Zulus, the group of people come together as Sotho, the group of people come together as Tswana, then they could create homelands. Yes, then they could create homelands and say, the Batswana will go to Botswana, the Basotho will go to Lesotho, the Bazulu will go to KwaZulu, the Swatis will go. They decided on that. When that happens, look at it. All of those lands were where? Outside. When you are all now outside, they could have the inner part of the country which is rich in minerals belonging to them, because it's not a homeland. So now, the whole issue after that came and they said, how do we keep on transferring wealth away from them and to us? And it started with the taxes. They started animal tax. Okay. You had a dog, you had to pay tax for.
To what?
You had livestock,
purpose?
You had to pay tax for. The tax for dogs, I think, ended even in the 80s. I think in the 1985s and that people were still paying tax for dogs. You had to pay tax and have a license for the dog. So people were paying for livestock. Now, you don't have money because your life is on what? Your life is not about money. You are planting, you are trading with others in the village, you are alive and happy.
It's a barter.
You don't need money, right? You are bartering. They introduce money. They say you're going to pay tax for your dog. And the tax that you need to pay for your dog has got to be in money.
How do I get that money?
So how do? You start selling your sheep, you start selling your cattle to get the money so that you can pay the taxes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
When you have no livestock left, you go and find a job where? In Johannesburg. So that you can make sure your family gets food.
They orchestrated this whole thing.
So you leave the homelands and you go to Joburg to work. When you get to Joburg to work, you left your wife back home. Your wife is not allowed to come to you to Joburg to come see you, because she needs a permit to come and live here. Everyone that lived in any area in South Africa, there was a permit. And in the permit it had names. So leave your wives back home. And when they get here to Joburg, they then brought a group of women in Joburg. to do what? To destroy the family values. So you no longer go back home. There's another woman here. And this woman, we are all fighting for. If I leave, when I come back, she's not mine anymore. So I stay here with her. And we start having other kids here. So you've got kids here and you've got kids back home. When you leave this one to go to the other, this ones don't have a father. When you leave this ones to come here, that ones don't have a father. So you're starting to raise a nation of men who are growing without fathers. And they are going to think it's okay not to raise their own kids because their fathers never raised them. So it becomes a set, it becomes how they think. That's how you create the type of Africans that was created here. So when you do that, you take the very same man, you transfer him as much as you can. When he starts having kids here and a wife here, you transfer him from here to Witbank. He now needs to go dig holes for coal in Witbank. So he leaves another family here to go find another family because they stay in a hostel. And when you put them in a hostel, what do you do in the hostel? In a hostel, it's a group of men that live together. When one brings a woman, everyone else sees the woman he's bringing. They see a woman naked. They see this woman getting into bed with him. They all want the very same woman. What are you doing? You're taking the dignity away. Because the process of you sharing bed with your woman has become public knowledge. Everybody's there. He has everything that happens. So the whole part of dignity is taken down. After you do that, you call him a boy. You let your sons call him boy. Your wife call him boy. The whole day he's called boy. By the time you put them into townships, at the entry of every township, you put a bottle store. He gets off a bus or a taxi, he walks, before he gets home, he passes a bottle store. He stops at the bottle store, he drinks. He's had a day from hell being called a boy. Nobody respects him. By the time he gets home, he's already drunk. He gets there and he wants to assert himself to everyone at home. The kids will know that I'm a man. This woman will know that I'm a man, not a boy. And he becomes abusive.
Because innately.
And when he becomes abusive to the wife, the son sees it and he becomes it. And that's how you create a South African man. That's how we see a South African man is. And you create a woman also that is unable to respect the man but fears him because he will beat me. So we've forgotten who we are. We have become what they needed us to be in order to carry the agenda of apartheid. It cannot be finished. The video that I watched of President Paul Kagame from Rwanda at Harvard University, and he was asked a question about democracy. And he was saying, why can't you accept the Rwandan version of democracy as democracy? Why must it be a democracy that emulates the Western democracy for you to be able to say democracy? And I'm saying South Africa needs to get to the place where democracy for South Africa should mean and be focused to South Africa. His question was that you are talking about democracy, and what is democracy? Democracy is a rule of the majority. That's what democracy is, yes. Right? But the president or the prime minister in the UK, the president in the America, and those, the prime minister in the UK that doesn't have 80% majority. In that Western democracy, someone that got 30% is able to rule people. Someone that got 30% of the elections rules people with 30%, meaning 70% of the people didn't want that person.
Yeah.
But you call that democracy. But you can't accept the democracy of Africa. That's where the problem is. We can't define democracy, liberation, freedom, and that in terms of the West. We need to define those things in what do they mean to us, our lives, our history, our future that we want for ourselves. And that is the only time where we are going to have the Africa and realize the Africa that is true Africa for Africans. And that's where this name always comes in of African solution for African problems.
This is the Funky Jazz podcast,
Woo-hoo!
and we're signing off right here at Northcliffe. And I hope that this particular episode is just going to enlighten you, it's just going to give you so much wisdom when it comes to our originality as African people, our rich history. From me to you, peace and love.